Hey everyone, this is Crow3 bringing you another Probius video, this time on a topic no one asked for, but I'm excited to talk about it, and that is Probius's talents. If you're interested in knowing more about Probius's abilities, a bit more of the basics of Probius, let me know. I'd be happy to make another video on that. But this time I really just want to focus on his talents, and why I'm excited about it is because I feel like he has just such great options in nearly every tree that it just is. There's a lot to talk about. So first, I want to talk about Echo Pulse. And now, Echo Pulse, it basically turns your Q into a boomerang. One point, you send out your Q, or your Disruption Pulse, and then 1.25 seconds later, boom, it returns back to you, dealing just as much damage. So it effectively doubles the damage of your Q, assuming you can hit your target. And what is helpful with this talent is it allows you to put down a Warp Rift and immediately Q, either before or after, and when the Q returns, it'll actually detonate that Warp Rift. So you can actually quickly run to a turret. If you wanted to get away quickly, you could drop down your Warp Rift, send out a Q before the Warp Rift is even ready to be detonated, and you just run away. And while your Q is returning to you, you can detonate from a safe distance away, let's say an enemy's fort. So there's a lot of utility there that also allows you to really boost your mercenary clearing speed as well with that technique. Basically just spamming Qs, knowing that you can either detonate your Warp Rifts on the return or the initial departure. So there's a lot of utility to Echo Pulse, and there's a lot of synergy that we're going to talk about, particularly in the level 7 tree, which makes this really effective. I've used Echo Pulse for my first couple hundred games as Probius. It's definitely the one I've used the most. It's no longer my favorite. My favorite now is actually Warp Resonance, but I still use Echo Pulse situationally in synergy with level 7, which we'll talk about soon. So anyways, moving on to Warp Resonance, this just empowers your Warp Rifts. Warp Rifts or Rift Warps? Warp Rifts. And hitting heroes with your Warp Rift, and it does 120 more damage. And after you hit 16, you get another charge. I found this is extremely effective, especially if you choose to empower that W with more of your talent options. It becomes really helpful. And honestly, it's my favorite for that reason that I'll talk about. But what this does, which I think is so important, at least in quick match games. And just as a disclaimer, I have only played Probius in quick match games. I'm the second highest rated Probius player in North America for quick match this season. And I love how obviously, quick match, I love getting into games fast, and I love being lazy and only focusing on Probius right now. So that's why I've played it. But really focus on quick match. And what I also like about it is you have to adapt, right, to maybe sometimes not the most favorable team compositions and making the best of it. And I found that if you can generally do more bursts, even if maybe less total damage, you can help secure kills, which just helps your team snowball. That's why I found empowering my W to be so has really helped me win. Next talent choice is Gather Minerals. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of this, but I have talked to some great Probius players about it, one being Cowflare, who is a big fan of this. And what it does is just it's a pretty safe talent. It just empowers your cannon. You collect enough minerals by just killing minions, and after you collect 70, which really doesn't take long, your cannon does 35% more damage, which is a big deal. It really adds up. So if you have enemies actually staying in range of your cannon, or if you're, let's say, in Towers of Doom, and you're solo pushing, you drop down your cannon with more health, it does more damage, you can really do some work, even if you don't have minions nearby. Even if so in that sense, it's really effective. For certain maps, it's powerful. So I gotta give Cowflare credit to that. Though my two favorite are Echo Pulse and Warp Resonance. If I had to choose my ultimate favorite, I'm gonna lock in Warp Resonance. Next tier of talents, I like all three of these. I spent my first couple hundred games as Probius, no joke, just playing turbocharged, because I felt like I always was just too slow and I wanted to be places faster. I found myself always tapping my Z, trying to get that little built-in passive movement speed boost we get. I think it's like every 30 seconds. This just empowers it, lets you do it more often, and increases your movement speed when you're in pylons. So with synergy with other talents, which I'll talk about later, it can be really good, particularly talents at level 20 that gives you a third pylon. If you space them out, you can actually move pretty fast throughout the map, even without even using your movement speed rush. You can actually, the 10% passive, without even using worker rush, you can get that boost. So there is synergy, but I'm going to talk about in later talents why I don't think it's necessary anymore. And what I've really been convinced with is the power of Photon Barrier. Once again, talking with Cowflare and some other Probius players, this is a very popular choice, and now I'm finally seeing why. What it does is if you have a cannon down that is within your pylon, so it's up, whatever, for the 13 seconds it's up, and empowered by staying within that range of your pylon, it gives you 40 spell armor. You don't have to be in the pylon. Your cannon just has to be alive and empowered in a pylon somewhere. And boom, you get 40 spell armor. And that's a lot. That actually allows you to comfortably survive Kael'thas ults. So you no longer have to get one shot by them or other powerful mages like Chromium shields you. So this really is just like, if you see an enemy, anyone that does spell damage on the enemy team, I'd highly encourage you to choose this because it really just negates their efforts. That being said, this also means you got to make sure your cannon stays alive, which means you might have to be able to be a little more defensive with your cannons, place it a little farther back, but I think it's well worth it. So it's a little adjustment in playstyle if you're used to other builds, but I think you should really give this a try. Let me know what you think. I'm a big fan of this. The last talent here I want to talk about is, well, Shield Capacitor. As it suggests, you gain permanent shields. You gain 10% of your health. It's not a lot of health, but you gain that after not taking. You gain that after 5 seconds of not taking damage, and I think that translates to. Well, I guess it depends what level you are, how much health you have. But ultimately, yeah, it isn't much, but in the long run, it really does improve your survivability. So I've been using this more and more, especially if there are no enemy. If there's no mages or other spellcasters on the team where I don't feel like I need Photon Barrier, I've been using Shield Capacitor more. And I found that it has really helped my dueling capabilities. So I'd recommend to give it a try. If you're like me and were addicted to Turbocharged, I would try other builds. That being said, Turbocharged does have its synergies that I'll talk about more later. But next we're gonna move on to the level 7 talent options. Once again, I love them. I love these talents more and more. I will say, though, my least favorite talent is in this tree, and that is Particle Accelerator. So after you hit 3 heroes with a Disruption Pulse, the next Warp Wraith detonated deals 4 additional pulses that deal 78 damage in random directions. And it also reduces your Disruption Pulse by a half second. So I've tried synergizing this with the Echo Pulse to allow that my Q or Disruption Pulse to return. And honestly, I really don't, to me, it just is not game changing. Even if I proc this frequently, when I put down Warp Rifts and detonate them, it really doesn't feel much more powerful than a regular Warp Rift. One thing that is cool about this is that if you have multiple Warp Rifts down, you can actually detonate multiple Warp Rifts from the actual Disruption Pulses firing out of that one pulse you erupt using this talent. So there's a way you can actually chain a lot of Rift Warps to explode, which in theory sounds like it could be cool. But I think just compared to the other talents in the tree, I feel like it's not reliable. It doesn't help you when you're not in team fights at all. So to me, it just doesn't seem worth it. And to me, the half second passive cooldown, it wasn't worth it either. But please give it a try. Let me know if you have had success with this, and if so, I'll try it some more and see if I can make it work. Next, Rift Shock. So this is this is what I use currently. But my favorite talent will be the next one, the Tower Defense. But we'll talk about that soon. So Rift Shock, it makes your Warp Rift hit harder. It gives nice damage over time that does an additional 105 damage over 3 seconds. I'm a big fan of this. I have found that it has increased my mercenary camp clear speed. It allows me just to one-shot. It allows me to clear waves of minions even faster than normal. It's just so efficient. And So, and especially if you combine this with the level 1 warp resonance, where you can get a third charge, you put 3 down in any minion wave, and they're basically all dead. You just make sure that you detonate that as soon as you can afterwards, within 1 second of actually arming your warp rift, and it does a lot more damage. And this also really helps your burst potential in team fights and getting picks, which can really help you win, at least in a quick match. That's why I'm a fan of this. Tower defense, though, it is iconic. It reduces your photon cannon's cooldown by 3.5 seconds whenever disruption pulse or warp rift damages an enemy hero. So this is very effective if you are able to land your W or your Q, and especially if you go for that boomerang Q talent that actually returns to you at level 1. If you just focus on at least hitting heroes with your Q consistently, and maybe perhaps using your W more defensively, you can put down cannons very frequently. Every few seconds you can put down a cannon instead of the 15 seconds, or what was the wait time of that? Instead of the 15 seconds you normally would have to wait, you can put it down every 5 or 3 seconds, or immediately, depending on how many people you hit. And this can really stack up. Why now I don't use this as much, and that is just because heroes I play against seem to actually know that my cannons can do damage, so they will respect it and move away from them, or move the fight elsewhere. Unfortunately, at least in my experience in quick match, a lot of team fights involve there's a lot of chasing, and with Probius, he's not that good of a chaser. He's great at holding down forts. If enemies want to get to your area and they refuse not to go to that area, well, you're in luck. You can just set up a lot of turrets and control the area with your pylons. However, at this point, the only time I really use this is if I see an enemy Stitches, or if I see other heroes that maybe have some really dangerous non-AoE damage, or like crowd control, like Stitch's hook, and I want to protect my team from them. So I really enjoy going against Stitches now, and choosing this build where I can just put down pylons or cannons in front of myself, hang out in front of them, hang out behind them, knowing that Stitch's hook can't actually go through and hit me. It'll just knock into the cannon and go back. And similarly, if I can predict when he's going to shoot out that hook at my teammates, I can put my cannon down and just block it and really frustrate him. So that's my favorite use of it right now. But currently my favorite is Rift Shock. Next, moving on to Pylon Overcharge and Nullgate. When I was just starting, I only used Pylon Overcharge. I did everything to empower my cannons, and I always would choose this. And my reasoning was I thought Nullgate was too hard, and it's overall reliable, right? You can be pushing a tower, you have your 2 pylons set up, and enemies come to gank you, or enemies come to defend, maybe like 2 or 3 of them, and there's only one of you. If you click your R, you activate this ult, it gives you basically 8 more seconds, if not more, of time that pretty much uninterrupted, that you can keep sieging or retreat, whatever you need to do. This gives you protection for that time, because most people, they hear that sound, they will know to kind of respect the pylons, which do a lot of damage if enemies stay in range, and will move away from it. So in that sense, it's a great talent. However, I have found that many heroes that are popular can counter this, particularly Nova or Samuro, who have a lot of clones. What they can do is they can just send out all their clones when you ult with your pylon overcharge, and they will target whoever's closest. You can't actually aim them. So they'll target all the clones. And it might show that you're doing a lot of damage in the end of game summary, but you're not actually hitting any heroes of value at that point. So that's the one bummer. Or people will just know, okay, let's avoid them. So that's why I no longer take this talent. I don't think I really ever take this talent now. I am all about Nullgate. And that's one of the only talents now I don't actually have for quick casting. I like to actually see where I'm going to place it. The beauty is you can just spam this. You can mess up royally, and it doesn't matter in the sense that the cooldown is only 25 seconds versus the 80 seconds for pylon overcharge. So that's why I love Nullgate. It's a really short cooldown. Take some risks with it. Get comfortable with it. I use this to just do damage on turrets. If the enemy team isn't nearby, I use this to beat people I shouldn't beat in duels, like Zeratul, or all sorts of heroes where you just put this. Heck, if you know a hero is just going to be on you, you put your Nullgate right on top of yourself, and you just kite around it. You just dance around your Nullgate, and enemies can't touch you, or it's a lot harder for them to touch you. And to clarify, sorry, what it does, 80% slow for 4 seconds for anyone who touches your barrier or your null gate. And they take 76 damage per second when they're in the area. So I've been able to even secure kills with this, or prevent people from, let's say, in like Curse of Hollows, or like, things where they have to actually channel certain things, or getting the nuke, whatever that instance is called. Whenever there's like objectives where you have to actually channel to obtain the objective, you put this down and its range is ridiculous. You can just capitalize on that. So I'd highly encourage any new Probius players or returning Probius players, keep giving Nullgate a try. I really think you're going to grow to love it over time. Level 13 talents. So I almost always have used Shield Battery. It gives you and your teammates 28 shields per second, up to 112, that lasts for even 2 seconds after exiting a pylon power field. I have used this, basically has helped makes me a healer at level 13 and onwards. I remember most recently I was able to save an Alarak who was like 9-0 from losing his stacks from a damage over time just from Shield Battery. He just hung out in the area and was saved. So your teammates will appreciate you for this and will really notice the contribution of your pylons. I think more so than the other two options, which I'll talk about soon. So this really allows you to especially counter damage over time abilities and allows you to duel better. You dance in your shields, or you dance in your pylons, or go within them, come out for 2 seconds, go back in, you're going to get the shield. That keeps regenerating. And heck, if you pair that with your level 4 shield capacitator, which stacks, it's good luck to, you're in great shape. So I would highly recommend you choose this talent in most games. However, I have limited experience, but some experience with both the aggressive matrix and power overflowing. I'm going to talk about them both together just because I don't have an extensive experience and I think they're similar. Aggressive matrix boosts only your allies' attack damage by 35%, which really is no joke if your team is really all attack damage. The caveat being they actually have to be within the power field. And if you think about a lot of attack damage heroes like Illidan or Samuro, like they're going to be most likely not within your pylon. They're going to be chasing. So that's kind of been my hesitancy with this. It can be paired with a Butcher for some nice effects, but frankly, I'd still rather give Butcher a guaranteed shield when he charges in. And then the final talent on this tree is Power Overflowing. It's similar, grants 10% increased spell power and some 2 mana per second. I haven't been that impressed with the mana regeneration, but then to be fair, I'm Probius, so my pylons just do that for me. But additionally, the spell power, I just have not been able to. It might just be a quick match thing, but I have not found it worth it. I don't think generally team fights won't always just stay within my pylons, so it'll be a lot of movement. That's why I recommend just going for Shield Battery, even if the team fight moves away from your pylon. Let's say there's some really dangerous damage over time on your teammates, or let's say a Kael'thas ult, or they just want to recover. They can run back into the area and get shielded up to help clear other minion waves, etc. This also actually helps yourself clear camps so much more easily. It allows you to solo really any camp in the game, besides bosses, at least to my knowledge. So I'd recommend this one. Level 16 now. We're almost there, guys. First, we're going to talk about Quantum Entanglement. This is actually the talent that I used for the first couple hundred games. And I thought this was the only one that made sense in this tree. It allows enemies to continue to be slowed by your Warp Rift for 3 seconds after the last contact with the Warp Rift. And so that slows 25%. So initially I thought, okay, well, if I'm trying to escape, or if I damage someone with my W, it'd be nice for them not to be able to get to me as quickly, or my teammates. So to me, I thought this was a safe choice. And I think generally it is, until I really realized the strength of another talent in this tree. But this is a solid choice if you're learning Probius. And yeah, it's a good one to start with. I'd recommend for sure. Gravity Wall, honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. I was not impressed with this. What it does, enemies are slowed the closer they are to the center of your Warp Rift, up to a max slow of 60. Why I dislike it is, unlike the Kel'Thuzad W that does more damage to enemies that are actually at the center of your W, it's not the case with your Warp Rifts, right? Your heroes can be on the edge of it or in the center. They're going to get the same damage done. So to me, I don't care if the heroes in the center of my Warp Rift are slowed by 60%. If, per se, this talent was enemies at the corner of your Warp Rift are slowed by 60 and the center, or whatever, 20 or 30, I'd be more intrigued, because that can maybe just guarantee I that can increase the odds that I actually detonate my Warp Rift on heroes. So I can see appeal in that sense with Gravity Wall and Gravity Well, but beyond that, I just don't think it's an effective kiting tool. You put that down, well, if enemies are already slowed by your Warp Rift, they're probably not going to just want to stay in there. They'll just move around. So I don't know. I wouldn't recommend Gravity Wall. If you were between the two, I'd go Quantum Entanglement. However, I got to give another shout out to Cowflare. He really encouraged me to give this talent a try. I genuinely believe this talent has increased my Probius win rate by at least 20%. Enemies hit by Warp Rift explosions have their spell power reduced by 35% for 5 seconds, and they're knocked away from the center. So, and actually, I learned the Probius's original talents interfere. It was actually basically two talent. It was actually the spell power reduction as one talent, and another one was actually that knockback. And now with his new talents, they're actually combined into one talent, which is even more of a reason to choose this. I initially was so skeptical by this because I didn't want to mess up the synergy with teammates if I was going to knock heroes out of the way of let's say my ETC's ult or Fia ult. That really depends on the enemy hero's placement. Or let's say a Kerrigan combo or Kel'Thuzad combo, you name it. We know how important it is predicting or knowing where heroes are going to be. And it's the worst feeling when someone messes up that synergy. And that's why I avoided it. But finally have been giving it a try, and it is phenomenal, the utility. I can actually now dual Novas. And even if they get me to 50% health, they're in the middle of ulting, you stay near her, you can interrupt her ult with your W. You can interrupt ETC ults, as I said. And what I love the most is I used to have a lot of trouble with Gul'dan. Now I can heavily counter him 16 and onwards. The most popular Gul'dan build being empowering his W, or that Soul Drain build, right? That's that channeling that just gives him health and just destroys his enemies. I can interrupt that consistently. It also reduces damage by 35%, basically taking him out of the game. Like this talent is phenomenal. So for anyone who hasn't tried it yet, I would heavily encourage you to try Interference. You can use this to save yourself even too. You don't actually need Turbocharged to get away. You're getting away, you put a Warp Rift down in front of yourself, keep moving, and by the time you detonate it, if there's melee enemies on you, they'll get knocked away. And you just keep doing that. If you have 3 charges of your W, it is just fantastic. Your survivability. It actually allows you to beat heroes like Zeratul, whose like objective is to stay glued onto you. You force them to have to use more and more abilities to try to stay on you by knocking them away consistently with Interference. And any other heroes that die to you, like Kerrigan. This is a phenomenal ability. I would implore every Probius player to learn this ability. I really have not found it to mess up too many times synergy with my teammates. If you expect them to ult, you just have to synergize and let them ult first, and then do your damage with Interference. But generally, I think the pros outweigh the cons. Please give it a try. Let me know what you think. I know this is a long video so far. We're going to talk about these last talents, and then I will end it. First is construct additional pylons. I used to only take this ability for, you guessed it, the first couple 100 games. I paired it with my cannon powering heavy build focused on Q and tower defense to just get as many cannons down as I could. And I thought, well, great, I can have my 3 pylons down and just do tons of damage to anyone who comes my way. And that's the truth. You do. But at least people I play against now, if you ult, they're going to likely move away, just out of range of the pylon, or put down clones. And additionally, I found with my games, they don't last very long. I know that's just like a new meta kind of thing, but team fights are generally very fast paced, I found, and there's a lot of chasing, as I mentioned. I never have time to actually get 3 pylons up anymore. And if I do, it's a problem for the enemy team. They should be destroying them. So that also comes down to my playstyle. I know I've read some Probius guides that recommend, it's important to actually prepare for a minute or two before objectives and get your pylons where you want them. And I understand it's important to put pylons where you want them, but I'd much rather use 2 minutes sieging or getting some camps or helping my team in another way versus just kind of sitting around waiting to put down pylons that potentially could be destroyed. So I do not actually think this is worth it. Great in theory. It also increases the damage of your pylons by 25%. It is the biggest damage boost for sure in this tree, but there's just no guarantee your enemies are actually going to stay within range or that you're going to have 3 that often. So that's why I have moved away from this. I almost always now take Gatekeeper. it makes your null gate last indefinitely whenever one end is within a power field. So if you play with this, you making sure you get one little part of your null gate within your pylon, and you can have an indefinite shield. And what I found, or an indefinite gate. And what's great about this talent is I think enemies eventually get used to the few seconds that your gate lasts, the 4 seconds that it lasts, and don't expect it to last longer. Or if they do expect it to last longer, they're usually going to pay attention to your gate in the beginning of a fight and maybe ignore it and go around it. But let's say the fight doesn't go well, or they're trying to retreat. They usually forget it's there, and there's a gate now that they have to deal with navigating, and they usually don't, and that causes them to wipe. You're going to eventually, sometimes you'll get people that actually know to destroy your pylons, but I think more often than not, you can actually get a lot of value out of Gatekeeper, especially given how short of a cooldown that null gate is, that it's worthwhile. So I use Gatekeeper to also push more effectively. I can set up a pylon and a gate to literally siege for me while I move away. They can just stay in that lane and help destroy anything that comes down that lane. So it's almost like Abathur in like his little beetles or whatever he summons. The Gatekeeper has so much utility. You can use it, and you can actually use it. Probius is lacking a lot of crowd control, and why I love this build is your interference, that knockback, and your Gatekeeper really give you and your team a lot more utility. The synergy is phenomenal. You can literally use interference. You can knock your enemy heroes into your gates. It is the most fun thing to do. You can just keep knocking them back into your gates, keep them constantly slowed, and you're going to win team fights. So you can perfect your synergy with knocking even the heroes that know to avoid your gates. Even if you quote unquote miss a gate, you just knock them in and it's game over. So please have some fun with Gatekeeper. Let me know if you like it too. I have had so much fun with it. And last two talents, not too much to talk about. I have not used Shoot 'em Up often. I have tried Q-centered builds. Once again, I just have found it underperforms with siege damage and hero damage. It gives your Disruption Pulse. It makes enemies, I guess, supposedly with a lot of health, take 2% more. Take 2.5% of their maximum health as damage, and Disruption Pulse by an additional half second. If you take both of those Disruption Pulse talents in the tree, you can get a 1 second reduction on a 3 second cooldown. So it's every 2 seconds you can fire it. And okay, in the grand scheme of things, I just don't think it's worth it. However, if you have enjoyed that, let me know, and I'll give it some more attention. But right now, I do not think it's worth it. Lastly is Probius Loop. I have found that I have not needed to use this that often, especially with the talent I like, level 16 knocking heroes away. Well, if you knock heroes away, they're already going to be out of range likely of your actual loop. And to clarify, what this does, you detonate a rift on an enemy hero, and then it creates a new warp rift in that same location. Takes that additional, the usual second or so to detonate, and you can detonate that as well. If you have an Echo Pulse talent, your Boomerang Q, you can actually detonate 2 warp rifts with 1 Q, which is pretty cool. Definitely pretty cool, but that also would require you to have a weaker warp rift in general. So it all balances out. I think this has potential, especially with the Boomerang Q, or just an empowered W build in general. But it would require a lot more CC on your team, trying to just guarantee that enemy heroes will actually remain in the same spot. So if you think there's just going to be team fights that are involving objective, like let's say bosses, where you just have to put down as many warp rifts on that one little spot for the team to claim. I mean, if you just have constant loops regenerating on that same spot, it's pretty deadly. So there are uses for it. I have just found that as Gatekeeper has allowed me to actually make a lot more plays, make picks, and really win more games consistently. So that being said, I hope you all have enjoyed the guide. My apologies for how long it's been. I'll make sure to put some little titles in the bottom where you can skip along to the different talent trees you want to hear about. If you have any other interests in other content with Probius, let me know. You know I love him, and expect a montage coming out in a few days with, of course, Probius. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.